What's up?
I see you in the morning light. New York, Boston, Philadelphia, LA. I still see your face. Buses roll, distance grows, but I remember you're just a dream away. Working my way, coming back to you. Working my way, coming back. Take me home tonight, not wasting any time. Highway 95, engines on overdrive. From town to town, and in between, I see you in the morning light. Take me home tonight, not wasting any time. Highway 95, engines on overdrive. From town to town, and in between, I see you in the morning light. Take me home tonight, not wasting any time. Highway 95, engines on overdrive. From town to town, and in between, I see you in the morning light. Take me home tonight, not wasting any time. Highway 95, engines on overdrive. From town to town, and in between.
All right, folks, good afternoon. Welcome to What Are the Odds with Barnes and Baris, and I am Rich Baris, half of What Are the Odds. All right, there's a lot of going on today. Barnes will be Barnes. He'll be here shortly. So before we discuss What Are the Odds well, I want to get into the CPAC thing with Robert and a lot of other stuff. But before we get Robert here, what are the odds the economy is ever going to do as well as it did under Donald Trump? Because we got some pretty crappy news at the end of last week and then at the beginning of this week. And I want to dive into this because I want to keep this going. Policy matters, right? Barack Obama was right. And if you weren't on our little test run over the weekend, then you didn't hear this. But Barack Obama was right. Elections do have consequences, and elections do change policy and the course of the direction of the country. And this index, under Barack Obama, they were so lenient. The way the media reported financial news, it was like, I never really thought this could be a partisan thing. It's either, numbers are numbers, either good or it's bad. And that's it. And we know from historical benchmarks what is good and what is not. And yet that all just completely, it started to go out the window under Barack Obama. And now it completely went out the window under Donald Trump. And they're going to do everything they can, everything in their power to make it look like the economy is doing better under Joe Biden than it really is. And of course, it's sadly not. It's not doing well under Joe Biden. So what happens first is sentiment, expectations, consumers, businesses, both. They have how they feel about their current situation. Then they have how they feel about the future. And with businesses in particular, they make decisions based on how they feel about the future. And consumers, they make decisions too, whether or not they're going to buy certain things, whether they're going to buy houses. And that's what we talked about over the weekend. The housing market was doing well in 2020. It was coming back in 2020. And even during COVID, it blipped for maybe 35, 40 days. And then all of these indicators went back to either historic highs or beyond their post-pandemic expectations. Now, today we have the Chicago Fed National Activity Index, which is basically a conglomerate of other indexes. Hang on one second. What's up? You want the volume higher? Okay. It's basically a conglomerate of different indexes, okay, that in a nutshell tell you whether or not the overall economy is doing better. And sadly, it's overinflated. So the retail sales numbers, some of the other consumer indicators, it looked like consumption is better than it really is. But we had revisions and it was not. And it was driven almost exclusively by that. Employment was abysmal. The contributions to employment were abysmal. And in the end, this just isn't good. It's not really sustainable. It's tepid. And after we published the article about it, talking about it, I was thinking tepid might actually be too good of an adjective. Because what are the odds, right? What are the odds we're going to have continued economic prosperity under Joe Biden? Not good. I'd say less than 30%. What are the odds if Donald Trump was reelected, we would have probably surpassed our 2018-2019 potential? Probably greater than 90%. And why do I say that? Housing is wealth in this country for most working people. Whether or not you own a home determines whether or not your family will acquire wealth. And everything was going fine. More than fine. And builder confidence now has already fallen off its all-time high, is headed right back down. It's at 83 or 84. It's only there because it's on its way down. Housing starts and building permits sucked. Pending home sales, which is everything. Existing contracts for existing home sales, new home sales. They sucked. And it's just a crying shame. It was avoidable. Completely avoidable. And I'm sure Robert and I will get into this too when he gets here, but this bill, this $2 trillion stimulus bill, stop referring to it as a stimulus bill. It's not a stimulus bill. It's a thank you to all of the people who elected Joe Biden, the President of the United States. It is rent-seeking at its worst. It will not help you. The Consumer Sentiment Index on Thursday is a joke. What he said, what Mr. Curtin said, is a joke. Yeah, it's bad. Yeah, this is the worst the lower third has, felt in a very long time about the future. But don't worry, maybe stimulus checks will help them. Richard obviously doesn't shop at Walmart. They're going to take the $1,200 to $1,500, what the hell ever they get, like a normal tax return. They're going to run out. They're going to buy a new TV or something. That's it. It will not help them. This is a joke. I'm going to bring Robert in here now. Bear with me, folks. Here, you know this is new. But, I'm curious to see what he has to say about this, because this is not how you accumulate wealth in this country. And this is not what this bill is about in the first place. Feed him back, Robert. I'll handle that. All right. All right, my friend. Thanks for joining. What are the odds?
How goes it?
It goes well, my friend. It goes well. You take it away. Tell me what you think. Actually, let me get your thoughts on this tax return. Everyone has been buzzing in the chat room about this tax return thing. About this. Well, you take it where you want to take it. All right, while I handle the audio.
No problem. So, I assume they're referencing the Supreme Court allowing the New York District Attorney to get Trump's tax return information. And once Trump was out of office, then this grand jury has regular authority. So that's not a major surprise. My view is all that fishing expedition that is going to go nowhere, that they would lose that case. And that would be politically very damaging to them, but also it would undermine tax prosecutions across the country. So I don't see them taking it. He has three different defenses in the tax context. They're kind of unique to tax. which include what's called a good faith defense. And that's if you believe that what you're doing is legal, even if you're wrong, it's a complete defense to tax charges. And the state law has borrowed from federal law in that respect. Secondly, the Reliance Defense, which means if you provided all material information to your accountant or tax return preparer or attorney, you cannot be criminally prosecuted or punished. It's a full defense. And that is clearly the case with Trump. And then third, if you don't actually owe any tax, that's often a defense if they bring an evasion type charge. So there are some cases where someone had their tax return been done properly. It turns out they didn't owe any money. So even if they deliberately made a mistake that was meant to lower their tax bill, if it turns out they missed other tax loopholes, then they also didn't commit any crime of tax evasion or the like. So I think that that's why I don't see a prosecution as probable to occur, because in order to do so, they have to overcome those three defenses. I can't see how they will do so in Trump's case. And they, on top of all of that, have to go the additional route of trying to establish any kind of liability on Trump that doesn't in turn implicate every real estate developer in the city of New York. So I just don't see it. I think it's mostly it's not a big deal. I mean, Trump wanted to buy time until after the election, so they didn't leak his returns while the election was pending. I think that was his main objective.
Yeah.
He's not worried about them bringing some bogus tax charges. And if they do, he'll be fully acquitted, and it'll be a waste of time by the government. And I think they're not really looking for taxes. They're looking for something politically embarrassing, and they're looking for maybe something on real estate, but they're fishing in a place where they're not like Trump had tons of lawyers and accountants review everything he did. So that's why it's always unlikely that he's going to get into any kind of legal trouble. If there was any legal risk, they would have already found it.
Yeah, wouldn't Mueller? I mean, Mueller had the scope here to go into all of his financials. I mean, at this point, Mueller would have found something. I cannot believe that he wouldn't have, or really Weissman, because as we now know, Robert Mueller, who does condone that kind of behavior. That's why he had somebody like Weissman on his team. But the only thing it really does, Robert, is keep people from deciding whether or not they want to run. Like, is there any doubt in your mind that there's some chilling effect that they're trying to put into place here, right? So,
well, especially as to a particular class.
Yeah.
What they're doing is they don't want business people running for office.
Right.
That's who they don't want running for office, because they know that professional class, people that make most of their money from labor already pay a huge tax rate. There's not much they can do to get around that. The career politicians have always released their tax returns. The people that don't want to release their tax returns are your independent business people.
Yeah.
And that's who they're trying to threat. That's why part of H.R. 1 requires presidential candidates to disclose 10 years of tax returns. The goal is to deter a particular kind of candidate from running for office. And particularly a lot of those that cash in on the presidency, they don't do so before they get elected. They don't do so while they're in office. They do so after they leave, like the Obamas as an example of that.
Yeah, this has always been some stupid ritual since George Romney, right? That they really like put. We have a bunch of these in our political system, which I think are just they're ridiculous, but they serve them really. So they're just there is nothing that you could, in truth, learn from somebody's tax returns. Even Joe Biden, immediately, and we've talked about this before. Immediately when he released what he did, which was not much in detail, there was an LLC. That was messed up. What?
You faded in.
Oh, I faded in and out. Okay. Yeah, sorry. There was an LLC on there that was this like really shady thing where Joe was getting money, and nobody really knew where those payments were coming from, Robert. So this same thing with Ted Cruz in the primary, in the Republican primary. He's like, oh, we're going to find out if he's working with the mob, releases tax returns. That's ridiculous. Of course, there's no way taxes are going to tell you whether or not somebody's working with the mob, which was a joke anyway. You want to pour concrete in New York City, you got to work with the mob. That's just ridiculous.
Well, especially during that time.
Absolutely. Now it's
very different. I mean, that was Rudy helped purge that out in part. But yeah, everybody knew that about Trump. I mean, so I don't see any of that as realistic. I just see it as more harassment. trying to create and more deterrence to other people who might think about running. But so I don't see that as a big consequential issue. The main thing Trump needs to do for building a 2024 campaign, if that's what he wants to do, is he needs to dramatically improve who he is going to be appointing in the future. He needs to surround himself with a better team now, because as we discussed during the election and during the nomination, Amy and Larry Schweikert can send his apologies to both to me courtesy. Amy Coney Barrett was the exact disaster and debacle we predicted she would be. Today, she was the vote that prevented the Supreme Court from taking up the election cases. Kavanaugh was not a big surprise, and I don't put Kavanaugh on Trump because Kennedy said he would only resign if or retire if Trump would appoint Kavanaugh. So that I don't blame Trump for. Gorsuch has turned out to be a mostly good decision. People can dispute some here, but he's a constitutional purist in the Scalia-Thomas mold. But Barrett was the great disaster. Barrett was supposed to be the one that was going to save the election.
Yeah, right.
Before the election, and people had all these excuses. Oh, she's just doing, and she couldn't come up to speed. And I was like, that was just a pretext. Now there's no more illusions. Barrett was a fraud from the get-go. Is an establishmentarian. I mean, recently said that California could ban singing in church on the grounds of COVID. There just need to be more evidence developed in the record. So the idea, she was a terrible choice. And the biggest hurdle for Trump is the biggest problem he had during his entire tenure, which is he's got to learn to put a lot better people around him. Yeah. Because these people keep coming back, mostly to hurt him. But I agree. I'm glad he's focused on getting back in the game. I'm glad he's focused on taking out and primarying these people. But he's got to start improving now the skill set of people around him and show he will not repeat the horrendous decisions he made. On almost every appointment he made was bad. I mean, you just go through it. I mean, Wray is kept at the FBI by Biden. What does that tell you? Especially as Garland is going through nomination proceedings today. That was a terrible. Garland, and everybody said, somehow Durham was protected by what Barr did. Nope. Garland made that clear today that he might fire Durham as soon as he gets in, and then he may never publish Durham's report. So that was a scam from day one. So all the Barr defenders and Durham defenders, appointee defenders, people not realizing they were defending Mitch McConnell, and people trying to defend Trump for deferring to Mitch McConnell. That's on Trump. He screwed up for 4 years on appointments. He needs to fix that. If he had it, otherwise, why would anybody have confidence that that if he can even succeed coming back? Barrett was his call. Had he put his appointee, not his call. That was McConnell's call. But it was another sign today of some of the bad decisions the president made in appointments by deferring to McConnell, just like he deferred to Paul Ryan on legislation in his first 2 years. Both came back to backfire. And I would like to see in his CPAC some reference to that. It can be an indirect reference.
Yeah, I was getting into that next.
Ego is of a kind not to really be truly honest on those kind of things, but at least acknowledge some part of it, some portion of it.
Yeah, I was going to get into that next, his CPAC speech and what he really needed to say, because this is, there's no doubt, make no mistake, this is absolutely a key moment for him. He is going to try, and everybody's billing it that way, that this is going to be his way to solidify the base, to take the party. This is a move. This is absolutely a move. And he made one similar in 2015 to foreshadow that he was serious and he was going to run. I told that story on Saturday when we were like testing out this, right? And I hate CPAC. If you've been to one, you've been to them all, Robert. And yes. I only went to that one because Mitt Romney's, I think, had been the last one I had been to before that. And it was a question of whether Mitt Romney was going to show. And he decided to. And he made a fool of himself, and he just overdid it. He jumped the shark. I'm severely conservative. The whole crowd was quiet. Everybody was looking at each other, smirking. It was bad. I mean, if you didn't know that guy was going to miss 3 to 6 million voters in the electorate, I mean, all you had to do was go to CPAC. Right? It was painful to have him get through that speech. And so here's Trump going to this CPAC, and I'm thinking, now the Republican Party could pick their nominee again. I want to know what their mindset is. I want to know what the base is thinking before we head into this nomination, whether or not they're done letting Fox News tell them who's electable and who is not, right? I want to know whether they're done having the party tell them who is electable and who is not, because I had a feeling they were. I could see it. I could really sense it in the numbers. Anyway, I go down there, and Trump's not even a headliner. And he goes up and he's like, he says this thing, and I'm listening to him carefully because people are saying he's a joke. You have the Krauthammers and the George Wills saying he does this for his brand. He's never going to run. Something struck me different, Robert. I don't even know the guy, and something struck me different. And he gets up and he starts talking about how this time the country is in such bad shape. I don't want to leave my wonderful life. I don't want to do this. But it can't be Jeb Bush or somebody else like him. Like, Fox News cannot pick this nominee. We don't have the time. And I remembered that. And I snapped up what he was saying. I said, that's it. That's the headline. Write it up. Here's the transcript. Go. Anyway, he sees the article. I wake up the next morning after coming home, and the site is blowing up, right? And it's Trump, his people, pushing it because we caught the headline of what he was trying to say. So messaging-wise, he was like, that's it, they got it, run with it kind of thing. And this time I may go just because it's been one of those years where I got to see what people are thinking again and to see if he is successful. He's done it in the past. He has used this venue in the past to circumvent the establishment. And I want to know if he's going to do it again. I just really quick before I get your take on that, on the appointments. No crap. No joke, man. Rex, Condoleezza Rice visits you in the beginning of your tenure and tells you, while you're transitioning actually, tells you that I really think Rex Tillerson is a great guy for this job. Here you are talking about how I don't want any more wars, which for people who don't know, like the battle between the State Department and the Defense Department, how this has been going on for decades in the post-World War II era, okay? The state, if you really want to make sure that you're not in forever wars, you have to have a strong State Department. Rex Tillerson, Robert? Rex Tillerson. I was hoping for like a, I don't know, like a second kind of coming of, oh hell, I don't know, a Nixon kind of approach. Really, and I hate to use Nixon, but Nixon wasn't joking when he said détente, and he did it. And he got, the only thing he may have been praised for was that, by the way, but cooling of tension between Russia, kind of coddling China to balance that. That's what realism's all about. And Rex Tillerson, you got to be, and then Mad Dog Mattis leads the defense. So it was just like putting a cat against a dog in the death match, and and we're supposed to stay at a conflict like that with a recipe like that. I mean, it's just crazy.
Pompeo at CIA, and then the State Department, Haspel then at CIA, Coates as the original director of national intelligence. I mean, these were all terrible choices. Sessions belonged anywhere but the Attorney General's office. There were some of us who were telling them that at the time. Sorry, Ann Coulter, but you should have been saying the same thing. That's partially on you, not just on Trump. So I mean, it was just bad. He wouldn't listen. I mean, there are tons of people begging, begging me to get access to, willing to basically give up lucrative careers to help Trump for 4 years. None of them got any level of gig. I mean, I had to go through Bob Corker is what I was told. I was like, this is a joke. So it's on Trump that he had as many bad people as he had. Towards the end, there started being some good people work their way in. But Trump just didn't take the position. Well, he needs to fix that, and he needs to show signs that he recognizes that. The way I'm hoping he does so is maybe by some jokes here or there, some sarcastic references here or there, that are a little bit self-referential. That wouldn't be all bad. But to see. So we'll see what I hope he does that part. I'm sure he'll lay down the law against McConnell again. And so it'll be interesting. The fact that CPAC, which was always a hybrid, CPAC started out, for people who don't know, CPAC started out as the grassroots conservative convention. So the Richard Vigories, the guys that came up on direct mail in the 70s and early 80s that helped form the religious right, that helped form grassroots tax protest organizations, not like today's tax protest folks, but old school, like property tax protest and stuff like that. People who were about the Cultural Revolution, people big on guns, some of your hardcore anti-communist groups that would go further than the establishment wanted to. And so they formed their own convention to be sort of the alternative. But during the W era especially, it became a substitute Fox News.
Yep.
A lot of the people, it was a real mixture. You had purists mixed with just plain old-fashioned grifters. People can just look at who it is that runs CPAC and look at how much money he took to try to lobby for somebody's pardon. And that gives you an idea for what happens at CPAC and why, as you note, I mean, I've forced myself to go twice, and I've regretted it both times.
Both times.
Yeah, I mean, it's just that it's just like these people are mostly grifting older grassroots conservatives, who's many of them are purist. But even take someone like, I mean, Gorka's kind of in between. The Gorka spent one of the CPACs, either last time or the time before, going after Alex Jones. I was like, why are you going after your allies? And by the way, Seb, you might want to take a look at who it is that actually tunes into your show and what they think. So it was, stuff like that. It was typical. And there were so many grifters and would-be lobbyists and people looking to just hustle some cash, looking for the next. I mean, it's like the Republican National Committee creating an election integrity commission. It's pure grift. They're not serious at all. They're just saying, oh, wow, we raised $250 million promising to help Trump. Almost none of the money went to Trump, but we haven't faced any blowback for that. So maybe we'll pretend we're for election reform still and raise a bunch of money, because I'm sure they're having fundraising problems right now. But so that's the good and the bad of CPAC's history. Trump really, the fact that Trump skipped CPAC in 2016 famously because it had so many Ted Cruz supporters and a lot of never Trumpers, and Trump was like, screw it, I'm not wasting my time with that. And then CPAC got blowback from their local. They didn't get the kind of audience they expected in a presidential primary year, and consequently, Schlapp heavily shifted, and CPAC in the Trump era became a Trump echo base.
Yep.
Put up Sidney Powell, put up Sebastian Gorka, put up Dinesh D'Souza, put up much more of the populist side of the party, or at least. D'Souza might have been a little bit of a late arrival, but that's another story. Effectively, CPAC became more of a Trumpish part of the party, and you still had the grifters and the all those types, but you had a good number of purists, and it was a sign, as you note, of where some of the institutional grassroots base of the party is going. Yeah. I mean, a few years ago, CPAC wouldn't even allow Steve Bannon there. Yeah. A few years before Trump, they wouldn't allow Breitbart. I mean, that's so disrespectful. They were trying to pretend they were the Tories from the UK. Like,
who did they take out off the roster, or was going to invite Green? That's right. And Matt Brainerd, for those he's like, we'll take her, because he's putting on his own thing. He's like, I'll take her. I mean, the bottom line is they're still making decisions like that. It's like, they had to
go beg Trump to show up.
Yep.
Is a sign that they know the only way they get attendance, because it's shifted to Florida, thank God. It was always going to D.C. is miserable most times of the year, but especially in February and early March. It was in D.C., it was in Maryland, it was at the Gaylord, whatever, the convention thing.
National Arbor, the Gaylord resort.
Oh, yeah. Yep. And I've, they've given me VIP passes in the past and all the rest, but man, the number of hustlers and hucksters at that place just drive me nuts, and the institutional types and the rest, but there are about half the people who show up are your true blue believers, your real grassroots folks. And the fact that CPAC had to shift to being almost entirely Trump oriented was a sign of how big the shift had been within the Republican Party, that they could no longer ignore it. National Review could keep ignoring it, and Fox could pretend occasionally it wasn't a factor. But CPAC is a sign of it. And the fact, to me, the biggest cue to me was just the fact they had to go beg Trump to show up in order to get tickets sold.
And it got a lot more colorful.
Orlando, it should be huge because people are desperate to get the heck out of wherever they're at locked down. Orlando's not locked down, thanks to the governor. So I think there would be some benefit to see what the grassroots temperature is. I've gone back and forth on going down there. So I'm not sure. Yeah. So if you go, maybe I'll swing down there. I don't know yet. I keep going just because whenever I go, I'm always excited. And then I get there and see all the grifters and the lobbyist types and all the corrupt actors and the people just looking to hustle quick cash and trying to come up with a bogus story to create a bunch of donations that they're not going to do anything with and all that jazz, and just drives me kind of nuts. But the fact they had to beg for Trump is a sign that what their real ticket purchasers want. And what they want is Trump, and more Trump. But I mean, an example that they're still behind the curve, CPAC should have had you and Matt Brainerd there for sure to discuss what happened with the elections.
I wasn't going to say anything, Robert. I wasn't going to say anything. But me and Matt, Matt and I, if that's not a panel, then you're irrelevant. And by the way, hat tip Charlie Kirk. Who brought us there? Who brought Matt and I there?
A hipper, more millennial version of CPAC.
Much. I got to be honest. I was really blown away by the crowd size. I was stunned. I was not expecting a crowd that big, especially during COVID. Imagine what it could have been without COVID. But because and under CPAC, Laura and I was saying under Trump, that last year in CPAC we went. It was more colorful. It was less white. Lot less white. Everybody's been going to CPAC for years. You know it. Huh? What's that?
Even Alex Jones was in the house. So it was, that's where an interesting CPAC or version of CPAC. Some years ago, I was talking to Cernovich about doing kind of an alternative to it. Steve Bannon thought about it at the same time. It's just so much of an administrative headache to put it together that decided, well, we'll wait on that. But the thing I would go to is, what if you put together something with Glenn Beck, Michael Savage, Alex Jones? I mean, obviously Limbaugh has passed, but when Limbaugh was around, I would beg Limbaugh to always show up. You're really interesting conservative populist types. Part one, and part two, and Steven Crowder.
Yep.
Then your populist types on the data side. Then your populist speech maker, policy people. One good piece of news is it appears that Trump is sticking with Stephen Miller. And that's a very good sign. So Stephen Miller is going to be the populist access point to Trump.
He may have been the only loyalist who made it through the whole thing. I don't know if anybody else went, year 1 to year 4 with the man. I don't know. I don't know. Everybody, Anton, Bannon, the rest of them, they got...
Miller did a good job of befriending all the family members. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
So
that'll do it.
Yes, it will. He's a smart man. Old school believer. I mean, really, what people don't know is that he converted Sessions. Sessions was not good on trade or immigration until Stephen Miller went to work for him.
Yeah, I was just going to say, he was an old
Sessions. He helped
first.
convert Sessions. So he's, but a real conservative populist convention would have all the popular voices together. And Freedom Fest does a little bit of this, but nowhere near the scale it could. And do the intellectuals, and do economics, and do legal, and do data. So on the economic side, it'd be a combination of your Peter Schiffs and your George Gammons, and then some of your Bitcoin people, all of those folks, your GameStop Reddit revolution folks. That would be a convention I would go see, because it'd be really interesting people there that you could really connect, that say, well, those people I want to talk to, those people I want to talk to, those people I want to talk to. Instead, they bring the your mid-tier conservative book people, right? That's who's on their list.
That's what bothers me the most, Robert. Downstairs, look, of course people are going to want to, sell their books and stuff, but it seems like the roster is not the prescient people who are out there doing. I'm not talking about this year. I'm talking about every damn year, basically. Right? Yeah. It's not who's the most who is making the most relevant case for what is going on right now. No, it's how do you say that publishing company? It's Regenries, or what's the name of that company? And I like them. I like some of the authors they got. Yeah, right. It's their publishing list for the year. And that stuff bothers me, man.
You're just your mid-scale conservative, that's not really that interesting. They don't even get the big conservative legal minds. Yeah. For the most part, it used to be bad pre-Trump, the 5-10 years pre-Trump. but it's still partially bad. I mean, I haven't looked at their list this year, but a lot of times it'd be they should have someone like Candace Owens as a high-profile person. She's on the populist right, very successful in the marketing space, etc. Instead, it will be like the second-tier version of someone trying to be Candace Owens that's there. It won't be like the Hodges twins or Diamond and Silk. It won't be any of those. It'll be someone that's within the conventional.
What happened to them?
Candace Owens.
What happened to them? What the hell? Diamond and Silk, are they just getting so censored you don't really see them anymore?
Well, I mean, Fox basically totally blacklisted them, and then they've been delisted in a lot of other places. They're still there. They're still doing their thing. It's just it's harder to find them now.
Huh. That's horrible. Yeah, they did. That's what Laura was saying. They campaigned. I remember that. I just don't. It used to be you couldn't go on social media without seeing them, and then boom, they're gone.
They've been removed from a lot of places, and that's where CPAC could push back. I mean, CPAC kind of briefly flirted with that when they had invited Milo, and then Milo became certain tapes leaked about Milo, and so they ran and panicked and shoved him off. When they should have just had a continued engagement. It would have been more interesting, more topical,
edgy. Yeah, that's spicy, edgy. That's something they have. They feel uncomfortable with that. I'm not going to say his name because I know he's really angry with the Republican Party. But I'm talking about this guy. He is straight out of the ghetto. You want to see ghetto vote getting? I mean, for conservative, I don't think anybody else does what he does, which is because he's from the hood. He is from the hood. And they were uncomfortable with the idea of him, Robert. Like, they couldn't work with him because they were uncomfortable going in that kind of direction.
They don't like the tenor and style of populist. And they need to just fully embrace it. And if they did, they would have a lot more success. I mean, I think how well they do, to some degree, Turning Point, while it's focused on a different demographic, could potentially replace CPAC.
Yeah.
If CPAC doesn't come up to speed with the populist energy behind the right. It's one place where the free market works. In order to get actual ticket sales, CPAC has had to move populist. But they haven't moved as populist as they could and as they should if they wanted to be a real engine of ideas, a real engine of social conversation, a very popular place to go. Instead, they tend to still be more driven by grifter insiders than they are what their audience is actually interested in seeing and witnessing.
Yeah, I wouldn't. My only regret with that Turning Point panel is not being more, what's the word? I guess controversial. So I wish I would have been a little bit worse. I wish I would have said something that everybody, because they're all looking at you. They're waiting for you to say something. And at this point, I'm thinking to myself, I'm not done with what we've been doing with our investigations. So, you should be a little smart with this, Rich, but in the end, and you know what it is, Matt, for people who don't know Matt, he's such a very calm guy. I'm really high intensity, and I'm like, I'm totally different style. I'm like, look at this son of a, look at this absentee ballot, freaking October, kind of thing. And Matt is very calm, as a matter of fact, Richard, did you see the 2,000 addresses all to the UPS store? Kind of nice about it. So it's weird when you're on a panel with different personalities like that. I felt like if I was overboard, it would have came through a little bit more as overboard. But now I kind of regret that because it was worse than I knew it was going to even be at the time. So because we weren't done yet, so I didn't have a full grasp of the entire situation of what had happened. I had obviously had my suspicions and I knew it was going to be bad, but I didn't know it was going to be that bad. And so I kind of held fire a little bit, but Charlie's events were far surpass CPAC in scope and I think relevancy and impact, because these people, these kids particularly, they're thinkers. And I'm not saying CPAC's not. I'm just saying they're thinking about the next big thing. They're thinking about the smart play. It's not just a conference that has become some kind of ritual for young conservatives. It's not that. It's something different. And again, this was during COVID. The last one I did go to was the one when Trump gave his speech and he went behind. We were 5 feet from the president. He's right there, and I couldn't help because you try to be objective. You're just trying to shoot the film and be objective. But he had me cracking up. He's like behind the podium, and he dips down, man. And I'm not big. People who have met me, I'm not a tall guy, right? But I'm vertically challenged. But Bloomberg's a midget. He's a midget by my standards, and he was mocking Bloomberg, and I couldn't take it, man. I almost pissed my pants laughing. He was hysterical, and I've never seen energy like that at a CPAC. And I even said at the time, if this man doesn't get reelected, they have a problem, because they're not going to just reach people like this again, and it's just not without him. So if he does, and if he goes there and the speech he gives turns out to be a success by the standards he's laying out for himself, because what he wants to do with it, then that's ultimately good for CPAC. Because if it goes back to being what it was, the Ron Paul and Rand Paul factions fighting the Mitt Romney factions, and then somewhere in between, the middle, like you were saying, the middle conservative trying to say, we got to find somebody who can win. We got to find somebody who can win. I mean, right? Year after year, that's all it was. It was gone are the days of Ronald Reagan using the American conservative unions of the world and the CPACs as a venue to win North Carolina. Like that is over. That is not what CPAC was in the interim years. Like you said, really the Bush years and beyond. It was gone by then.
No doubt. Yeah. So, I think it'll be interesting to watch. It's always interesting to survey and to see how much they have to model go in certain directions in terms of what the post-Trump era looks like. If there was any chance whatsoever for the McConnell wing of the party to succeed, they should dominate something like CPAC.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
The fact that they're not is a sign that even that means your lobbyist, because the people who will really monitor CPAC will be your lobbyist, will be your political consulting class. It'll be that crowd, and that's the crowd that if they're seeing that Trump dominates, that will have a proportionate effect.
Right. So what about? I got to ask you about this. We could burn 45 minutes, no problem, Robert. I'll tell you that. I'm torn on this one a little bit. I am, because I think, and on one hand, the number is so ridiculous. But on the other hand, I told you so. I told you also. Robert and I told you also. So Mike Lindell is being sued for, how much is it? It's $1.3 billion by Dominion Voting System. First of all, just give me your overall thoughts about that. And then second of all, what's the merits of the case kind of thing?
I mean, what I told all of them, Sidney Powell, Lynn Wood, Lindell, I mean, indirectly, and also publicly, was that the whole Dominion suits were traps, that they were repeating information that was basically easily provably false, didn't make sense while they were saying it, and that they were walking into a situation that was not only going to damage the president's election contest in the courts of law and the courts of public opinion, but would set themselves up to be at some serious substantial risk of being discredited as lawyers and as legal professionals, possibly being disbarred in the case of Lynn Wood. And now, on top of all of that, possibly bankrupting one of the key financiers to populist conservatism, Mike Lindell. I have no doubt that Lindell really believed what he was stating, but the standard simply shows reckless disregard. In other words, and the problem is all these cases right now are pending in the D.C. court. Now, my view is, especially Lindell, I don't see how D.C. has any appropriate jurisdiction for Lindell.
What the hell is that about? Yeah, I don't understand that, Robert. How does that even happen?
Well, they just sue there, and then they know the courts are so political in D.C. that they'll often they get to decide their own jurisdiction. That's the problem.
Okay. Well, there you go. There you have it. So even in his own state, though, I mean, I don't know. I mean, the bottom line is, do the opposing voice, because if that's the standard, then does it hurt them that there were other people out there saying that this is nonsense? Like, so.
Well, especially now, once he did his, I have to go back through the Lindell suit, because Lindell had said fewer things, as far as I remembered, than Wood and Powell had said. But the problematic statements, claims about whether or not the machines are hackable, and they're going to be on good grounds there. Whether they were hacked is a different matter, but there had been a lot of people showing that it was not too difficult to hack various electronic voting machines for a while. In fact, the whole media narrative setup was to blame Trump manipulating somehow the machines.
Exactly right.
Trump had won. That's why you have PBS doing hit pieces on that, on the
Even
Georgia
Nate Silver
machines in
teed that up.
particular, Georgia litigation.
Even our buddy Nate Silver teed that up, Robert. Even he said the only way Trump could win this election is if something's rigged, and
Exactly. They were building that narrative in advance, and so. But I mean, the dumb statements were statements like Dominion's really owned by Smartmatic, and the Dominion was foreign owned in a certain, actually quit being foreign owned as of 2018. It had been sold to a U.S. company, claiming the Chinese had funded it, claiming that there was computer servers in Germany. These are specific factual statements that could be easily debunked with about 5 minutes of research. Or simply knowledge about an elections. I mean, there's the other problem. Sidney Powell doesn't have a clue about elections. Lynn Wood doesn't have a clue about elections. Rudy Giuliani doesn't really have a clue about elections, not election law. That has never been his thing. And and Mike Lindell, he makes great pillows, not manages elections. And he fell in with that crowd. And it's going to be a problem. And so and I kept telling him it was a trap. And the only reason why Dominion wasn't saying something right out of the gate and Smartmatic wasn't saying something right out of the gate in terms of going at them with correction and retraction requests, then it was absolutely a trap. They wanted them to keep digging until they buried themselves. I mean, Sidney Powell's been promising people or, been predicting that somehow the Supreme Court was going to take their cases today. Said there might be an opinion on Thursday. It's like, there's never going to be an opinion on Thursday, even if they did take the case on Monday. So I've just run out of patience with all that. I think it's still a trap. And the damages claims will be up in the air, but it's unfortunate but predictable. Lindell's all excited because he thinks he's going to prove things. He's going to discover all these people that he's been listening to don't know what they're talking about. I mean, one of these hustlers, I mean, you know about him, Dennis Montgomery, going back to what he tried to do in Arizona. He was key to all this nonsense about, we got the proof. Here's the logs. Here's the over. No, it's none of that. It's all garbage. It's all hogwash. They did not, if you'd watched this show at all prior to the election, you knew they didn't need to go to the machines.
Never did.
They could steal this the old-fashioned way.
Yep.
And so the Time Magazine laid out what they did. It had nothing to do with the machines. They just changed the rules mid-election, as Justice Thomas complained about today.
That's
and
right.
So it was a complete sideshow. It's another case where Trump did not make the best decisions. He could have, because he had three options. He had the institutional insiders tell him to be quiet and go home. And then he had quasi-grifter outsiders like Wood, like Powell, pushing crazy personalities. Or he could have gone with the people that were who were giving him one foot in both worlds, the actual popular strategic advice that could work. Of which I was only one. There were people close to him that worked in the White House that were making this advice. And unfortunately, he kept going back and forth and back and forth. And then he got snookered into the Wood-Powell world and letting them have any platform and putting Rudy in charge. I think all these things, at least I hope, Trump now recognizes were not the best decisions. But that's where I want to see, part of what I want to see in CPAC and Trump moving forward. Like Trump says he's going to screen primary candidates. Well, he better do a lot better a job than he did the last 4 years. Yeah. Because the last 4 years, he kept picking the wrong people again and again and again and again and again.
Against some good people, too. And I'll tell you this, I know that.
Luther Strange was not the right guy for Alabama Senate. And the only reason why Roy Moore got nominated is because Trump failed to get behind Mo Brooks.
Yep.
So that was on Trump. That was because of Trump. That was caused by Trump.
There would never have been
Mitt Romney didn't face a challenge because Donald Trump said not to challenge him. Mitch McConnell didn't face a primary challenge because Donald Trump said he wouldn't support anyone but McConnell. Yeah. Lindsey Graham didn't face a primary challenge because of Donald Trump. Trump made bad choice after bad choice after bad choice with primary candidates, so he better have a better crew around him now, or he'll be repeating the same mistakes. And then, then it's time to look past Trump. So I'm hoping that Trump, I mean, I'm agitated today because everything we predicted about Barrett became true, and Trump,
It gets
Trump
annoying,
wouldn't listen.
doesn't it?
Trump wouldn't. There were tons of people, by the way, in the White House, other people telling Trump this. He just didn't want to listen. Now, now Mitch McConnell keeps urinating on him so much that Trump can't help but respond, finally. But we need to see more than that. Trump needs to put a better team around him politically. Stephen Miller is a great choice. It needs to be Jason Miller, okay. But he needs a bunch of smart populist people around him, and he needs to start doing it now so that we have confidence that he's making the right picks. People have been asking when we're going to do this, when we're going to do a PAC, when we're going to do other stuff. Part of this was waiting to see because whatever Trump does can just completely move the machine, move the engine. You'd be screaming against the wall if Trump decides to get involved. But I hope he gets involved intelligently. Otherwise, we'll have to figure out ways to try to continue to promote Trumpism better than Trump frequently does. It'll be an interesting week.
Yeah, I mean, it gets, folks, it's only human to get angry after a while because it's annoying. Sometimes it just comes downright annoying when people, to be right. That's it. When people not listen, and you get into these arguments, and it's like, I don't know, I used to call it whack a fraud, with like the Bill Mitchells of the world. Like these people would like pop up, and everyone out of nowhere is like a constitutional lawyer, Robert, or, like out of that's like, were you right? And then, or out of nowhere is like the best pollster in the world or a statistic, right? It's like, where the hell do these people come from? And then they amass people, and they sadly mislead people. And during the perfect example during the Mueller probe, the idea that this was some kind of a white hat operation, you know where I'm going with this.
Oh yeah.
And then also the warnings over the 2 months, you and I on this show, on Inside the Numbers. I mean, the freaking time we spent on putting up bullet points and explaining to people, this is how this is done. And yes, it is very easy to steal a race here, to do this, to do that. It not only is it doable, it's very easy, actually, if you do A, B, and C. Then you have
Justice
people like
Thomas laid out today.
Oh, he's going to win.
Justice Thomas went into detail about the risk of mail-in voting fraud. Yep. What Justice Thomas's opinion was exactly the strategy that I had recommended to Trump, and a lot of key, smart, populist lawyers around Trump told him to follow it. He did briefly, and then he fell off the res. And that's why we're saying Trump's got to get better at who he appoints, because he only hired the best. Not during his tenure. He mostly only hired the worst. He mostly only picked the worst possible people. This was a problem that he's got to come to terms with, or we can't have confidence in who he's picking moving forward. If he's going to pick primary opponents that are just as bad as the person they're replacing, what's the point? And so he's lost a lot of confidence. Particularly as people watched Barrett is just one example, but as they saw what happened with McConnell, as they saw what happened with the election, as they saw what happened with impeachment, as they saw what happened with sometimes Kavanaugh, but definitely Barrett, more and more people have woken up to, as they see Wray is still in the FBI under Biden, people are like, wow, okay, Trump made a lot of mistakes when it came to our pretend QAnon, Bill Mitchell. They're all super secretly working for Trump. No, they weren't. Is now more and more publicly disabused. It's almost impossible to continue to believe such nonsense. But that means that, there was this tendency that if you supported Trump, you're supposed to support everything he did blindly, not second guess him ever, not question him ever, not question any choices ever. That was not a good thing for Trump. Trump often relied upon feedback from his own base about when he was going off skew. And there wasn't enough pushback, frankly, about his appointments in particular and his delegation of policy. He needs to start putting policy people around him like Stephen Miller that people can have confidence in the choices he's making moving forward. The speech will be a sign of that, and some other things will be a sign of that moving forward.
Yeah, he's got to get it in the gear, though, because, it's like we don't really have a whole lot of time, and I'm hoping things just fit right? Because like you said, he could really derail something that, we put together. He could derail it very quickly.
I mean, Ohio, you have a guy like Josh Mandel. You have some other people that are real populist.
Yep.
You have that fake female Senate candidate pretending to be a Trump supporter who's not on any core Trump issue, just lying to the voter base across the board.
Robert,
what Trump makes in the Ohio Senate race will be very key to whoever wins that primary. And he needs to pick the right one and not make another, hey, folks, Big Luther is great, when everybody in Alabama knows he's a corrupt hack. That's why crazy Roy Moore got nominated. And so we'll see. And then so I hope that we see more of that. But to the degree CPAC is kind of a proxy of that, the failure of CPAC to invite many populist speakers to their roster other than Trump is not a good indicator.
Yeah, they're going in the wrong direction. You can see it already, Robert. You can see it already. And Ohio, great example. Ohio is a state, used to be razor thin, right? Before let's people have short memories. Ohio was a razor thin presidential state until Donald Trump. Not even Barack Obama himself could win that state by that kind of margin. And I've been warning everybody and telling everybody, this is not a republic. It is not yet a Republican state. It's a Trumplican state. And if you do not make the right decisions moving forward, you can lose. Like you did not make the right decision falling back on Jim when Josh Mandel left the race that last time. Josh Mandel, hands down, 100%, which is why I got attacked by the Stu Rotten turds of the world, 100% was going to spank Sherrod Brown all over the Buckeye State in 2018 if he stayed in that race. He would be Senator Josh Mandel right now. We polled it, and it was it was over. He had the Portman side. He had the Trump side, which is not a really Republican vote, a lot of those voters in Ohio. And then he had the traditional kind of Romney, like, conservative, and independents knew him well. He was going to cruise to, 7 to 11 points, no problem. So that's that. Now, if they pick this other fraud, and I said this the other day, people are telling me, what do you think of her? What do you think of her? I think in 2016, I remember John Weaver and John Kasich trying to turn the state Republican Party against Donald Trump. I think, guess who was in the state Republican Party that year? There were a few people in the party who criticized it and said, we should support our nominee no matter what. No matter what you say about Donald Trump, he's infinitely better than Hillary Rodham Clinton. And she was not one of them. I don't remember her being anywhere, Robert. Anywhere.
Exactly. And she's not pro-Trump on trade. No. She's not pro-Trump on war. Yet she's running all these campaign ads pretending she's pro-Trump. And it's a problem if Trump takes the bait of making the same mistakes he made repeatedly that we're now all suffering the full scale of the consequences for. We experienced it during the time to a certain degree. People were just pretending that it wasn't what it appeared to be. But now we're really going to get the consequences for it. The fact that Barr was never legit, the fact that Durham was never legit, the fact that Huber was never legit means that there's going to be problems at the Justice Department moving forward, even worse than what we experienced under Obama.
Oh, yes.
And the same in the Defense and State Department, where the drumbeats for war continue to go unabated. That is in part possible because of who Trump put in place. Pompeo was never good. Haspel was never good. Coates was never good. Grinnell was decent, but he was only there a brief period of time. And it's not clear to what degree he's in Trump world now as well. So there's hopefully a lot of key policy personnel changes that Trump will make and will show and how he picks primary candidates. And we'll see glimpses of that in his speech. It'll be interesting to see, because if I were Trump, I would use this as an opportunity not only to lay down the populist future that you foresee, but to at least preview where you're going to fix some things. Where some things went, sort of give a little bit of a review of the last 4 years and include all the positives, include all the important stuff, but also include some of the weak links of how things need to improve.
I could have done this better.
Basically saying, look, for 4 years I helped you don't have to put it Huey Long style, Huey Long said when he first got to the governorship, he's like, I tried to negotiate with him. Now I just crushed the SOBs.
Yeah.
And because he learned quickly that you can't operate the way that the insiders want you to operate.
Not in the system. You can't. Yep.
He needs to take direct shots at Romney, direct shots at McConnell,
Absolutely.
direct shots at Cheney. Throw down the gauntlet, and come up with some comedic lines. The old school Trump. Go a little bit off script. Don't be totally on script. Don't he was so much better when he was unscripted, and I get because he would go a little haywire now and then. He went with the scripted thing, but he's no longer president. Go get practice a little bit, just riff it. He was great when he riffed. When he used to riff at CPAC, that famous how he negotiated with China.
Yeah.
There's two ways to negotiate with China. You can say, "Oh, could you please da 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 da," or you could say, "Hey, motherfucker, this is what you." That was everybody laughed, but it was like his classic Trump. It was so show some signs of that and incorporate that. It is indicative of where even Pence recognizes his future, that he has been at every CPAC for 18 years. And now he's afraid to even go.
He's not even trying to go. Right? Laura is, let me tell you. So the silver fox is now the silver skunk. She can't stand him. She just can't. And in the end, I told everybody, Mike Pence is Paul Ryan's buddy for years. They have been best buds, and he comes from that middle of the road, what we were talking about before, because he was not really full blown. He started as a radio show host. He used to love Rush kind of thing, but then he went very National Review like kind of for a while. I mean, that's who he is.
When he was a congressman, he was an institutionalist. His brother is still an institutionalist.
Absolutely.
His brother voted against the election challenge.
That's right. I mean, who could you imagine? Oh my! And I'll tell you, because people are asking a lot about Mandel. Look, the only thing I love Mandel. The only thing I would tell you is, and I wouldn't even tell you this. I would tell Josh this. Josh, you just I don't want to blow the guy's business up on TV, and I won't. But Josh, you better or on YouTube, but you better get with your white brother and make sure you're ready this time. Because that's a seat. That's a seat, then you would have been the U.S. Senator from Ohio right now.
Huge improvement over Portman.
Oh, absolutely. And no, I don't know anybody else. This old idea, because they bought it in 2018. Well, he's a congressman. He's got a base of support. And I told them, I told them that's not going to help Todd Rokita in Indiana. And it's certainly not in the primary. And it's not going to help Jim in Ohio. He is a very traditional kind of Republican. The Ohio voter that elected Donald Trump for it's like 5-6%. That is not a traditional Republican that he routinely, and I don't mean 5 or 6%. I'm talking about the entire electorate, his vote share. 5-6% would probably never consider voting for a regular Republican. Just never.
The other guy that would be great if he would look at running, he's probably thinking it's too early, but the guy who replaced Boehner in the House is a great populist conservative.
Jordan. Not Jordan.
Not Jordan. The other guy. He's relatively new, but he's great on every single issue. He's like one of the truest, purest. He's like what Trafficant used to be on the Democratic side of the aisle.
Oh man,
old school populist across the board. I love old Jimbo. He used to be a sheriff, crazy old school populist, probably corrupt, but crazy old school populist at the same time.
Probably corrupt. Yeah, but you know what? I'll take those old guys, Robert. I'll take those old guys over these people.
Absolutely.
Any day.
They were real congressmen.
They were real congressmen. A lot of people don't even, understand that kind of corruption or wheeling and dealing. That kind of stuff is nothing new and probably will be there forever. The 13th Amendment was passed by
it's corruption that's for the. It's like Big Jim Folsom said. Of course I stole, but I stole for you.
Yeah.
All of our politicians, 95% of them are corrupt. The question is whether they're stealing for you or stealing from you.
That's it. That's so true. I mean, the 13th Amendment was probably one of the dirtiest amendment deals ever. And, but it was a question of what was it for, right?
Exactly.
You can compare that to the crap they had to promise people to get the log rolling deal for the 16th and 17th. Now, it was just dirty across the board because that didn't help you in the slightest. You know,
Exactly.
I mean, it fed the beast. That's it. And didn't starve.
Well, as they famously said when they passed the income tax 16th Amendment, this tax will never tax the hair on a working man's head.
That's right. And
that didn't last long.
That's right. And that it would be, some people actually had the audacity. They knew they were lying. You can read their own, primary source public documents now. Back then they were not, but promising that it would be, I'm only supporting this because I feel we may need the funds for wartime. And, we would give it back after that, I mean, it would have, come on, you're kidding. You ever see a tax that was implemented and then taken back and repealed? Get the hell out of here. Come on.
No doubt. The, that isn't like one person asked me who could replace Rush.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, there's only one person I can think of that even could theoretically replace Rush. I don't think anyone can replace Rush's style. It was a very unusual, skilled combination. But the one guy who could, if he wanted to, and the question was, or is, would he want to? Would he be good at it? And how would it impact his political aspirations? Would probably be Trump. That's the only person like you think, okay, who would I tune into 3 hours a day reliably that could get anywhere close to Rush's audience? Donald Trump every day would probably fit that category.
And Rush, he could get the audience. Rush, though, like you said, I don't know that anyone could do it with his style.
He couldn't replicate the skill. He could only replicate the audience.
Because
but then I thought, that would be interesting.
Knowledge,
Well, is that a good idea or not a good idea? I mean, Trump probably won't consider it right now because he probably considers it kind of beneath presidential status. But I'm not quite sure that's the case necessarily.
Well, I'll tell you what, you could clearly tell he was devastated. In his interview on, he went on Fox, for crying out loud. That tells you everything you need to know. But then on Newsmax, he had it was later in the day, right? He had a more, maybe the next day, a more somber interview. I think it was a much deeper interview. Fox was doing the ratings chases. That's what they were doing. And then, everybody does the ratings chase. That's not fair, but you know what I mean. It was very superficial.
And Trump's back to calling it in again. It's
amazing
how he loves doing these just phone
Newsmax.
interviews. He doesn't want to have to send to the TV or the rest because he ain't done whatever the makeup or anything else. He loves just yipping on the phone. And still a master at that, no doubt.
The only candidate for president I've ever seen do that in the modern era. And everybody took him. MSNBC, Morning Joe, all of them on, whether it was left-wing Morning Joe on MSNBC or Fox and Friends in the morning on Fox News. Nobody gets to, folks, nobody gets to call in when they're running for president. I know not everybody works in media. That isn't allowed. That doesn't happen. And yet he got away with it, which told you everything about, how hot the guy was at the moment, and I just don't, with Rush, it's like he had this way of having a policy knowledge, but still keeping it very fun. And it seems like every time there's somebody else who has this knowledge of policy, like somebody,
I don't know if any people talk Mark Levin. Mark Levin's never compared. The only guy who I thought could have compared to Limbaugh had he stayed on a different path would have been Alex Jones. Yeah. But Alex Jones carved out his own once he made the decision about 9/11 that he did, that meant he was never going to be on the Limbaugh track. Though he was the only guy otherwise that had that combination of, he could do the rant, he could do the intellectual analysis, and he could do the entertaining style. That integration is very hard. And especially do that 3 hours a day. People
has to be natural.
Limbaugh
Robert
came up in the DJ world. He came up in the old school talk radio world. He knew how to do that instinctively. Very few people today know how to do that. Levin is kind of average in my view. Glenn Beck at times is good, times boring. I can't listen to Ben Shapiro for 20 minutes.
I was just going to say, that's what happens when you try to do that. That's what happens. Not only the voice, right? Then very nasally. That just drives me nuts. No offense, Ben, but it just drives me nuts. Oh, thank you.
By the way, Ben's wife is a doctor, just in case.
Really? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there you go. There's that. I mean, it gets boring. And I don't think Beck could do it. I think Beck had a good run there when he was on Fox. I always thought he made the wrong decision when he left Fox at the time he did.
Yes.
I don't know.
He thought it would be easy to replicate that.
he
It was
did.
never going to be easy to replicate that. He thought he could easily compete with Alex Jones, and in that independent space turned out much harder. Almost went bankrupt.
Yep.
Has made some smart, and then almost killed his political career by going after Trump so much. And then he did the mea culpa, back his conversion to Jesus, and all of a sudden he was on the Trump train. And since then he adjusted. He has done a good job of picking out good young talent. So he brings in Steven Crowder, he brings in Dave Rubin, he brings in some of these other young conservative voices into the Blaze TV space, and really starts to make that paywall a worthwhile paywall. That is reinvigorating, buys up some of the other competitors or merges with them. Almost merged with the Daily Wire. I'm glad he didn't. I couldn't tolerate.
That would have been too much between Levin TV, and then if he would have taken the Daily Wire, it would have just been too much. It would have been too much.
He's got to go. Elijah Schaefer's on Blaze, so a good combination of young skill set. But he's not Limbaugh. He never was. The Limbaugh was a very unusual at combining three traits: an institutional Republican by ancestry, a populist conservative by ideology, with an experienced radio talk show entertainer by biography. And you're just not going to find those three in one person.
For the book, Robert, we should think about adding at least some part of his impact, because people were asking me last week, all the interviews we were doing, I was reflecting, and they asked me to reflect on his life. And I am from a working class area. And I remembered, and I had almost really forgotten until, his death makes you think about it and people ask you questions during an interview. I lived in a working class Italian, very democratic. They voted for Reagan. That's it, kind of thing. And but other than that, Bill Clinton voters, Democratic voters, and northeastern Italian Democrats. That's where I'm from. And I remember Rush Limbaugh when I was young making it fun, and and getting them, my kind of people, to give a second look at conservatism that they pretty much abandoned after Reagan, because I don't know, they are conservative. They always were, family, religion, faith, they always kind of were, but at the same time they have nothing in common with the Prescott Bushes and the Herbert Walker Bushes. So they lost those people after Reagan was no longer president. And maybe even a bunch of them gave Poppy Bush the benefit of the doubt the first time, but not this. That's why he lost to Clinton in the second round. And then in the end, when I got older, I have no problem saying, and I wasn't a diehard Rush listener, but I have no problem saying that Rush Limbaugh absolutely was a calculus in my very first vote for president. He was. There's just no doubt. Because I was like, what am I? Where do I fit in the political spectrum? But I always looked at the Republican Party as, I don't belong with these guys. I'm too cool for these guys, kind of thing. Like, I like to have fun. I am not, I'm not that kind of Republican. I don't get. And then somebody like a Rush comes around, and like everybody has said, but it's true, that he made it fun and made it like okay to believe something, right? So you don't believe this crap. This new politically correct wave is coming over the country, which I grew up in, that era of political correctness trying to sweep over what you were and were not allowed to say, and somebody says it out loud and you're like, all right, it is all right to think that, it is all right to say that, because I know my whole family and my whole neighborhood believes that, and somehow we're supposed to be shamed now. So that was what he did with that was very appealing to, even while he called himself conservatives, he was very appealing to the pro-populist part of the country, from which I absolutely, now that I look back at it, come from. It was either Democrat or some kind of new candidate who hated everybody. And I know half my block voted for Ross Perot. I'm telling you. When he didn't run again, my friend's mother wrote in Perot or Mickey Mouse. I'm not kidding. That's the kind of neighborhood I come from. No joke.
Yeah, well, because the Republican Party because people forget that the Cold War created a certain unique political coalition capability for Republicans on a national level, in that it brought together conservative Catholics and other sort of war skeptical groups, like your Pat Buchanans of the world, German Catholic background in his case, but represented a broader population that had been isolationist before, that were leaders against World War I, leaders against World War II, especially in the Midwest. But the Cold War changed that for a lot of those voters. The fear of communism, the fear of what it meant, a lot of it tied to their Catholicism. Once that was gone, what you had left was a Republican Party's core constituencies of country clubbers and church-going Baptists.
Yeah.
Neither of which were real popular in the working class North.
Yeah.
And so the Buchanan kind of began to expose that in the primary challenge to Poppy. Perot really expanded on that vulnerability. And Perot would have been the first Trump, but for the ability of deep state actors to scare him out of not running initially. He was leading and he would have won. It was the second time Trump became serious about thinking about the presidency. Because I'm sure he was sitting there thinking, holy cow, that
I can do
midget
this
with the big ears is going to be president? I could be president. And I'm sure that's where the idea got locked in. But they chased Perot off, and effectively and then Perot came back because they kept insulting him repeatedly, which should have been a sign to the media. Yeah. If you want to run off a billionaire outsider who tends to react to certain kinds of coverage, don't trigger him to get back into the game by continuing to attack him and try to destroy him. Because that's what they did with Perot. They put that headline of quitter on, I think, on Newsweek or Time. And that ticked Perot off so much he came back into the race. And that's where he ended up almost 20% of the vote. Just because he got to participate in the debates. Because he participated in the debates, they set the rules to make sure no third-party person would ever be back into the debates again after 96.
He had one of the best lines ever, too, in that debate. Had one of the best
lines he was great.
Ever.
He showed Trump the potential utility of that outsider businessman, just honest talk routine with his whole, I'm all ears. He made fun of his ears.
Mm-hmm.
He did all of Barack Obama never had the guts to be self-deferential or self-mockery in that regard.
No way.
And that man's ears, I didn't realize how I was like, holy cow, those are some ears. Those things just go, whoo, sideways.
Dumbo, yeah.
It's like, it's Dumbo. It's something to be. I can, I wouldn't want to look in the mirror and think about those ears. But but Perot was game to do it, and they had crazy Stockdale as his vice presidential pick. Why am I here? What am I doing?
Why am I here? Yeah, that was it.
Don't worry, James. You're out of the POW camp. Everything's okay. But John McCain, before John McCain, in certain respects. But that sort of it was a sign that there was a whole populist constituency that did not feel at home in either party, and Clinton bought them off temporarily. Then W bought them off temporarily with 9/11 and converting that into a patriotic movement. Then once W betrayed that, Obama was given sort of a second Clinton chance to make a democratic recovery with that group, and then he failed. Yep. And that's why they were so desperate for something totally outside the system. I believe if Trump had run as an independent in 2016, he would have won. It might have better served him in retrospect had he done so. But because I think there was that much dissatisfaction. And I think that's what they're seeing with all these polls and surveys is the 3/4 of the Republican Party tomorrow would support Trump over the Republican candidate. That means the Republican Party's a walking corpse.
That's it.
The only thing that keeps it alive is Donald Trump.
That's it.
And it either becomes Trump's vehicle or it goes the way of the Whigs.
That's it.
That's the future of the party.
That's it. Robert, the more we learn, the more we look at this, you would have thought some of this would have toned down by now. It's not going to happen. I didn't get a chance to upload all our files yet, but I'm sure you saw, and we haven't gotten a chance to speak about it yet. Now Republicans exceed Democrats again for wanting a third major party. That has always been the case, that Democrats, 50% or more, wanted a third major party. And that's why they always work so damn hard historically to keep the Naders off the ballot, to keep the Howie Hawkins of the world off the ballot, to Jill Steins of the world off the ballot, and even to some degree in certain states, they don't like the Libertarian Party on there either, because it's something else that younger, disaffected, would-be Democratic voters could choose. And now, for the first time, that disparity is huge. We haven't seen that since Bush cratered the party, and it still wasn't this high. So Bush destroyed the party, and Republicans lost super majorities. I mean, really, or they didn't lose super. They lost, and then we're suffering a minority of under super majorities. And we still didn't have numbers this big. So
Trump's basically like Michael Myers from the Halloween film.
He could kill him.
The establishment keeps stabbing him and stabbing him and stabbing him and killing him and keeps coming back. And what they don't realize is what's animating Trump isn't Trump. It's the populist demand for someone like Trump.
Yeah.
That's why they can't kill him, because they can't kill it. And there's no question. They thought that they had set him up perfectly. They were going to use the Capitol Hill riots as call it an insurrection, maybe get him impeached and convicted, at a minimum crush his credibility. McConnell go full scorched earth against him. Nikki Haley was going to leak to the Politico and make her dramatic moment. We were just wrong to follow this dangerous man. And instead, it all backfires on them. But the reason why Nikki Haley thinks it won't be consequential is she saw Trump for the last 4 years. And she's like, hey, I went against Trump in the South Carolina primaries, and he rewarded me with a UN ambassadorship. Yeah. So I'll just I'll try to torch him, and if it doesn't work, I'll just call him up and he'll let me in. It was a good sign that Trump is. I was just gonna say these people should study one thing about Trump. The man loves revenge. He's been saying it his whole life, that he enjoys it for its own sake. He considered it as a virtue. A virtue of a human being is to get, or at least try to get, revenge on those who have tried to screw you over. And the idea, and so it was a good sign that Trump has improved in certain respects. Not only his direct attack on McConnell, which was pretty good. It's funny seeing Trump not have to be limited to the number of characters in a tweet. So that's what's interesting about these little, because they're like two-page emissaries, like little 1 page, 2 page. So we'll see how that develops, still in the very Trumpian style. When it's really Trump, the way when it's written like that.
He could smoke.
But I love the fact that not only does he reject Nikki Haley, he leaks to the press that he rejected Nikki Haley. And that was a good sign. But it's because all these people just keep thinking their old party's coming back. There's nobody connected to the Lincoln Project that's ever getting a consulting gig ever again. They were supporters and patrons of cancel culture. Yep. Now they get to suffer the consequences of that cancel culture.
Look at David French today.
Yeah, when you're busy helping groom young boys for perverts, it turns out maybe you're not a moral icon.
Yeah, this is preach it, because that's what I always drove me nuts about the character argument. Like I've said a million times, this is such a load of crap, and nobody has a character in this business. So just,
it's
like,
all projection. It's like I was watching an MLK film the other day.
That's what Laura says.
And it was all the fake letters that the FBI was sending the king, and I was like, man, they were describing Hoover. They're describing themselves. Yeah. What they're saying, sexual degenerate, this and this and this. You're a fake. You're a fraud. You're not who you say you are. And it's like that doesn't describe King. That does describe J. Edgar Hoover. That does describe high-ranking people in the FBI. Then and now, and so it was interesting to see. But that's what a lot of these attacks on Trump are reflective of. So there is only one future. People talking about Republican Civil War. That's over. The Civil War lasted maybe a month. And the Mitch McConnell side just doesn't know yet to wave the white flag. They're gonna have to be like a chicken walking around with their head in their hands before they recognize that their future is gone. There isn't one. And so when Lindsey Graham recognizes that and is trying to play pretend populist, even after he now is 6 years away from a re-election race, that tells you everything you need to know. because he wanted to be on the McConnell side to sabotage Trump. And he's just good enough at reading tea leaves to know he has no political future at all unless he's somewhere in the Trump sphere. Now, Trump still should not unduly trust that man.
It looks like it is a good sign that he told Nikki to go pound it, because she did think she was just going to get, back in his good graces, because that's the behavior that he showed before. So they figured they can run all over him. I blew that crap right up on Bannon about Nikki Haley and Lindsey Graham and Tim Scott. I will let that be a lesson to all of these hack, two-faced pieces of crap. If you run around talking trash about somebody behind their back, then you better hope your donor doesn't have me in their Rolodex to call when the minute you walk out the door. Many of you probably don't even know this. The minute you walk out the door, my phone rings asking whether or not you're a waste of money. And then they tell me everything that you told them over the last hour or two of dinner. So let that be a lesson to you that Nikki Haley should have known better, didn't. And I don't think Team Trump knew about that, what they were doing, Robert, all these last 2 years.
At least not Trump personally.
Yeah, at least him not personally.
He should have been. Now, I will say that, Trump told me on the phone that he was going to use the election to election contest issues to see who his friends truly were. Mm-hmm. And if people had studied Trump, they would have known he's done this in the past. He talked to Charlie Rose and said, bankrupt, he said,
it's a great interview.
Great interview where he says, I used to always say it'd be nice to go broke to see who your enemies are. And Trump made a little joke. Maybe it isn't so great to go broke after all. But but he said one upside is I did find out who my adversaries are, who my friends really are. And and people weren't paying attention that's part of what he was doing. That it was worthwhile to him to contest the election, even knowing the probable outcome would be courts and Congress would not come to his rescue, solely to find out who's really on his side and who isn't. And in the end, the number of senators who ended up on his side, you could count on one hand. And the number of House members, by contrast, was 2/3.
Yeah.
So I think it won't, he'll focus initially on the impeachment vote, but at least he originally intended to primary anyone who didn't vote with him on the election issues as well. Including, he was public about this one, Thune in South Dakota, who's now crying about, people are being critical of all of our Republicans that voted for impeachment. Yeah, they shouldn't even be in the party anymore, Thune. And in a real party, McConnell would no longer be a leader, Cheney would no longer be a leader, and anyone who voted for impeachment would be stripped of their committee positions. If we're going to do that to Marjorie Taylor Greene because of something that she said 4 years ago, why she wasn't even a member of Congress on Facebook, then by golly, we can do it to Mitt Romney today.
Well,
that's what if the Republicans in Congress had any clue, those would be the actions they would be taking. Of course, instead, they still have these rogue actors in the top, McConnell number 1 and Thune number 2 or 3. And then, of course, Cheney still number 3 in the House.
While you have Democrats, they circled that they would never do that. They would never abandon each other like that. They still have a man on the House Intelligence Committee who slept with a Chinese spy and is completely compromised.
And helped lead the impeachment effort.
And they helped lead both impeachment efforts. This is just incredible. And it goes to show you what John Thune said. This is how stupid and clueless these people have been forever, because the language he used, I had Benjamin Nisanoff on Friday, and we were talking about this. You can't win a game if you don't even know the rules of the game. And he's using vocabulary like cancel culture in incorrect context. He doesn't even know what he's talking about, obviously. A primary is a contest. It's an absolute opposite of cancel culture, where you disapprove of what somebody has to say, so you try to destroy them and take them out before they even have a chance to contest. You get them, you destroy them and take them out beforehand. Whereas a primary is like a legitimate contest, right? So this is, it's like somebody commented and Laura sent it to me. Thune is shocked that primaries are an actual thing rather than a ceremonial process. That's exactly right. A human stone, right? Commenter, exactly right. These are people who may pretend that they're different from Democrats, but in the end, they're really not that much different. And especially in how they view the world and how they view government, they expected this Fox News assisted handicap forever. and they don't feel like that their wing of the party should have to compete on equal footing. If they don't have 3, 4 more conservatives splitting the vote in a primary so they can squeak by with 33%, then they feel like it's rigged against them. These are these like crybabies who couldn't win a game of dodgeball when they were kids. They were never picked first, right? They were picked on. So now they need the system to be their bully for them to get, so it's sad, man. It's weak. It's really weak. That's what, and it's not fair, he says. I couldn't believe it's not fair. It's not, what the hell are you talking about? Trump is here because you haven't been playing fair forever, and now you have to suffer the consequences of that. They don't see it. They just don't see it, man.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So CPAC will sort of help shape some sense of how things are. It will at least influence the insiders in Washington, so worth watching for those purposes. See how much effort Trump puts into this speech, because I think it's a lot of people are going to watch this speech, given it's the big speech after impeachment, the big speech after he's left office, the big speech to signal where the future is going. And there's a lot of things to look for in both of those presentations. And to some of the questions about the books about the Election Integrity Project. On the Election Integrity Project, part of this is waiting to see both what Brainerd's doing, but also whatever Trump's going to do. Because if we jump in there and create something, and then Trump goes off on his own random thing, all of a sudden all your effort and time is worth nothing, because he'll dominate. He'll suck up all the oxygen in the room. Yeah. So there's a little bit of wait and see for that to take place. And then, but in terms of the books, the 2 books, one is the Plot Against the Election, for what happened in 2020, go through the whole history of what took place. And the second, The Populist Majority, we'll be working on those soon enough, but there's a lot of things in the fire. So some things have priority temporarily.
Yeah, I'm actually, when it comes to the Populist Majority, I've actually got quite a bit that I haven't shared with Robert on that yet, and I do need to do that. But there is a lot in the fire. He's right. So, but I was hoping with the way what I was on my side of it, Robert, I was really hoping it would influence the presidential election. Now, I'm not saying they got to wait 4 years for a book, but I am saying timing does matter when it comes for book releases. And I'm looking at all this stuff that I'm trying to convey, and I'm thinking, like if you drop this in 6 months, it would fall on deaf ears 3.5 years later. It just would fall. Because look at, and if you don't believe me, go look at Adam Kinzinger's Twitter thread today, okay, about how he's trying to explain away that all of the gains that were made and all of the political shifts by simply claiming that, Trump got more votes, but Biden got more than that. Like, he's an idiot who doesn't realize why Biden was able to get that number. That's it. He's a tool. He's a complete and utter tool. He doesn't get it. And those guys, unless they're defeated, at least their mindset isn't going away. And it's very hard to crack through that kind of stupidity. And you have to time it right. Yeah, I learned that before the election last time. So 2 months. Yeah,
I think potentially good timing would be for the Plot Against the Election would be sometime maybe this summer, maybe especially if Freedom Fest does form, maybe tie it with that event, something like that. But I think a good timing probably would be maybe by the time of next CPAC 2021 to impact people running in 2022. Would be a good release time period for Populist Majority. So and then how to run for office is something we'll be working on in conjunction with whatever Matt Brainerd is doing to make sure that we're not duplicating
stepping on
effort.
Each other's toes. Yeah.
And replicating effort. Exactly. Because he's doing a lot of good stuff. So it's making sure we're in alignment, and that, to see whether does Trump have something sophisticated or not as sophisticated. Is he going to focus on content, or is he going to focus on platform as a distributive role? Like, I think one thing would be interesting is, maybe what he could do is create like what the Amazon Fire Stick, but the free speech version of it, and call that Trump TV, but not necessarily be Trump created TV. It might just be access to all of the independent conservative creators out there that's on one stick that you can plug into and watch, just like you can with Amazon Fire. And he would, One America News Network already has a little something like that, basically like the Apple Box too, just a replacement of it. And it would monetize his brand. make sure that the audience has access to all the independent populist creators on the right.
Yep.
And integrate it in that way, because I think that's what can potentially work. But so I mean, I know he's thinking about a lot of things. Until we see what that is, he kind of dominates the room.
Yeah, and the money, and that's ultimately the issue.
And he dominates public attention. Yeah. And as you know from the when if you worked for a campaign and you didn't know which way Trump was going to come down, or if he was going to come down, it was incredibly nerve-wracking. Because if you put a lot of effort in a campaign, and then a month before, Trump's like, I'm going to endorse the other guy. You realize I did all this for nothing. This was a waste because we're dead. We're dead in the water. So got to figure out what he's doing on that side of the aisle too.
You sit there and pray he's just going to stay silent.
Yes,
and then
yes. Because I mean, was there anybody good he endorsed in the primaries? I'm trying to think of anybody that he put over the top. I can't think of anybody.
No, honestly, no. Unless somebody ask the audience if they have an example. I'm serious because I mean, he could have put Doug Collins over Loeffler. Instead, he implicitly backed Loeffler. Absolutely, and I'm not even a huge Collins fan. I'm just saying.
No,
he could have been better than her though.
He would have been much better. And he struck me as a straight guy when I was down there.
Timid. He's a timid guy though.
Yeah, he's not as timid as the governor though. So it's by comparison.
One phone
and
call,
Loeffler
Robert.
was always a fraud. Collins was never. Collins was a legit guy. The question was how much would he be willing to take gambles up front, confront people. But we can't
say anything yet. But we are.
There may be some fun people coming out of Georgia.
Yeah, I mean, one phone call away, and Kemp's career is over.
Bye-bye.
All right, we got Robert and I are in the process of setting that up. And we're gonna do our level best because it's over for Brian Kemp.
And for folks that have asked also about like a lot of some of these campaigns, some of these election reforms, we're trying to put things together behind the scenes at this stage.
Yeah.
So there'll be more announcements and other things over the next 6 months.
There's a lot of positive developments on.
Oh yeah.
And
there's 30 states. You know it. Because you can watch, only a stuck pig squeals, as they say in Arkansas.
So true.
And Mark Elias has been squealing a lot about all the election law reform proposals that are coming forward.
I'll take it any way I can get it.
30 states with major reform proposals.
I'll take it any motive. I don't care what the motive is at this point. I'll take it any way I can get it. Whether they called and they're concerned about what happened to the president last November, or they're calling because they're concerned what's going to happen to them as a result of it. I don't give a rat's.
In Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Arizona, Ohio, all these states are looking at making sure they have the best type laws, and they're looking to each other to help formulate it. We have some role behind the scenes at this point in time where it's best, most effective. But there is a lot going on in that sphere and space. Just because the public hasn't been engaged yet doesn't mean nothing is happening. Quite the opposite.
This is I'll roll through a couple of them. I'm just gonna say this real quick. Robert, I got this same question, and I got it on Saturday too. The answer for me is absolutely not. I would never run for office. Robert, would you ever run for office?
I much prefer to be behind the scenes.
Yeah,
I prefer to be.
I
prefer to be. I'm really a recluse by nature.
Yeah.
The people find that hard to believe because I've been very high profile in the last 4 or 5 years, but that's not my native instinct. I like the Robert De Niro's character from Wag the Dog. That would be my ideal role in the world.
Yeah.
And because you can influence so many more people. And you're not stuck with the limitations of your particular office and what that means and doesn't mean.
Yeah.
I told people during the Trump administration that because it's Trump, I would take whatever, if someone wanted me to do something, I would do it. Whatever that was. But I preferred to be outside of the administration and political power to be on the front.
Yeah,
there are people, the best people to be on the front are naturally charismatic, frankly, people who like people. Don't. And I'm, I'm so at that. I don't get energy by being around crowds.
Yeah.
Don't get it. Your Viva Fries. He would be a great He probably wouldn't think of himself this way, but he would be a great politician because he naturally likes people. Very engaging right away with people. I think he was a leader in law school, all that kind of thing.
Oh yeah.
He would make probably a good candidate, though this is always the other hurdle. Every decent human being doesn't want to get near politics. They feel it. It's like it's like walking into certain places. There's no way to walk out of there clean. So it's hanging out with some of Swalwell's girlfriends.
Yeah. And we're having that problem right now. I mean, we have approached people, and I got one, a specific candidate for governor of a certain battleground state that I didn't realize was still that. Well, of course I knew it was a battleground state. I just didn't think it was closer than I thought it was going to be. Just put it that way. And some people have a hard time, they just don't want to do it. They know they have no illusions over what it is. And they don't want to, it's tough to get them to make that jump. But in the end, the bottom line is there's some of it too. You got to find people with egos in this. You do. And they have to have an ego, because people say, well, I don't know about
ego.
this guy.
They need to love people. They need to be energized by people. Now, what I told people is, if there's nobody like that running and you're willing to throw your hat in the ring and just to at least get your voice out there, even if you don't think you can win, then go ahead. Absolutely. Now, I think one thing we do need to adjust is spending lots of money on high profile races that everybody knows you can't win.
Yeah.
So there are 5 or 6 of those again last cycle.
Again,
where I get promoting the candidate. There can be other benefits to have. Now, it's useful for somebody to run in every single race because it impacts turnout across the board. Democrats understand this. This is why they will find somebody to run in the reddest district in the world.
They have unity tickets, Robert.
Exactly, because it gets somebody out that may not vote because they like you for, say, state house. Yeah. They may vote, and then they may vote across the board in favorable ways for populist candidates or causes. So it's always useful to run everywhere. I always find if you don't go in with the assumption you have to win, then you can look at it as a platform to motivate people, a platform to engage people, a platform to discuss issues. You can make a real positive difference without needing to spend lots of money, without needing to focus on win or bust.
I tried to explain that with Rust Belt states last year. It fell on deaf ears. Everyone was out for themselves, and that was it. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe next year, next cycle would be a great time for you. I'm still being nice back then. Maybe next cycle would be a better time for you. But you have the president at the top of the ticket. You got this person even running for state, legislative district, whatever. You need to have a unity ticket to win in a state like this, to bring out this many voters in district, whatever, to bring out that many voters in district. They just weren't getting, man, that's over their heads. And Democrats are much better at doing that. I guess we missed this question, back to Lindell. Let me read this correctly. This is for you, Robert. So if Lindell was getting official advice from Montgomery, let's say, right, paid or otherwise, does Lindell in turn have a case against Montgomery for providing false info? That's a good question.
He absolutely does. Think? And in my view is he could also look into who and what exactly QAnon really was, because if QAnon was at some level government source disinformation, then that too is relevant. Because Montgomery got a huge boost from the QAnon world, and but for QAnon, none of this happens. Yeah. QAnon was the ticket to get access to Flynn, get access to Powell, get access to Wood, get access to Lindell for all these ideas. So hopefully he'll explore those. I think he really believes all of it at this point, and he thinks he'll be able to prove it with discovery. The fact that he's being sued should probably be an indicator his assumptions are wrong, but it is what it is.
And on the Supreme Court, while we're on legal issues here, I have my own, but you're a lawyer. I have my own views on this. Barrett is a bit of a question mark for me on this. She really is. Now, some conservatives will be like, I think that's ridiculous, but I don't, especially after a couple of the rulings we've seen. So how do you think the current Supreme Court will be on gun rights? Say a Second Amendment case like a New York or California style law goes nationwide, and Democrats try that, all right? How do you think the Supreme Court would rule, this Supreme Court, on something like... So I imagine what he means by that is something that in the past has either been struck down or even not yet, but doesn't comport. But what was the one in Chicago was a big deal. I can't remember. But the case in Chicago, I think it starts with an H, I think. But in any event, it turned out that the Supreme Court did strike down that law, that state law, saying that he had a right to individually, own a firearm, or a handgun. I think it was specifically. What do you think about this court?
I think that was one of them. Was the McDonald came up out of the Chicago? I think the other one, Heller, came up out of DC.
That's what I was thinking. Heller's DC, McDonald's Chicago. Okay, and then so what do you think about this court and the Second Amendment?
On paper, the two areas where she would be, I think fundamentally she's a reflexively authoritarian institutionalist.
Yeah.
So if you go through that filter, if there's a dispute between the individual and the government, she almost always sides with the government. If there's a dispute between an individual and a corporation, she almost always sides with the corporation. So she goes with power. She goes with authority. Now, on paper, the two places where she would be good would be the church, because that's pro-authoritarian, pro-institution to support the church, even against the state. And the other was the Second Amendment, because that's one place where her originalism seemed to be consistent and extended. One warning sign is what she did with the church case in California, where she only concurred. She said that maybe the governor can ban people from singing in church, even if they could just develop a better evidentiary record, which was ludicrous. So that showed that that primarily the big question is, will she side with authority and institutions no matter what? And will she even favor the state over the church? In most instances, there's more and more evidence that that's probably where she's going to come down. I think she'll still be good on the Second Amendment because she's made an intellectual commitment to it for many, many years, including in her Seventh Circuit decisions. So that I thought was the one place she would be good. But now everything has to be up in the air because of her prior church decisions.
Yeah, I mean, that's why if she's willing to swing so hard on one thing, it scares me. Anytime I've seen that over 3 decades or two,
she comes from old money South that still wants approval from the right Manhattan folks.
So true,
and that's what got us Roberts. And she looks a lot like, I told everybody, she's a lot like
Roberts. She really is starting to look like that, man. You were right on with that. And it matters because, just from a public opinion guy's point of view, experience in life matters. And she does. You had a good point with that. She reminds me of a female John Roberts, period, in a newer era, slightly newer era. But still, what do they have in common? This like Catholic schoolgirl, schoolboy kind of,
student body president, like Reese Witherspoon character in Election. That's who she is. I mean, she's been thinking about being on the Supreme Court since she's been in law school. That's who she is.
Yeah, and even played ball when she knew she wasn't going to get on it. With playing with the guessing game with Kavanaugh. When, like you said, those were all dupes.
A true intellectual does not spend 20 years writing about procedure. That's all she did. She wrote about the procedure of originalism, not about the substance of it. The procedure of it. This was a huge sign that she was an intellectual fraud. That she was a phony, that she was not someone who if she believed what Scalia believed, she would be writing about substantive constitutional issues, even though that would be controversial. She chose to make sure she never wrote about anything of consequence, aside from the very first opinion piece she wrote, and that piece was meant to be controversial so that she could get a job. Because that's how you get a job in the legal academy. She was always a fraud, and Larry Schweikert and all the rest. Yeah, shipwreck crew. They can all send their apologies, courtesy of Richard.
That is how you basically audition, folks. What she was doing, what Robert's talking about, is you're auditioning for a Senate hearing. I mean, that is what you're making yourself attractive to somebody who needs to get an appointment that's going to get through the Senate committee. And somebody like a Donald Trump she probably loved, if for no other reason than she knew the Senate was going to get difficult for a president like that, and that he would be put in a box like he was with Ray. Speaking of Ray before, he had to get somebody through the Senate. He was being told it wasn't worth the fight, right? And the whole spiel. This is how they play the game. And people like her, who know where they want to end up, they audition for it, and they make themselves available and appealing to that kind of person, that kind of president, or that kind of governor, whatever field you're in. And that was blatantly obvious. So
no person like that has ever made a good justice.
No, and I was just going to say they're the worst.
They've all been terrible.
And Ted
I mean,
Cruz is right
Gorsuch
about
was
that.
an intellectual who was aggressive about his positions, didn't hide them, wasn't bashful. Thomas, same deal, just a pure intellectually curious individual. Of note, 5 justices are lifelong Federalist Society members.
Yeah.
A majority today voted against the election law.
Man, they got to go.
The one guy who is
Society.
not a lifelong Federalist Society on the right, on the Supreme Court, Clarence Thomas.
Yeah, the Federalist Society has been misleading Republicans for years, and they're not they're not Republicans like the listeners who are listening who are Republican.
Their country, they've been pre-cleared, pre-screened by the country club crowd.
That's it.
And that's what makes them untrustworthy, unreliable for conservative, constitutional, populist-oriented folks on the court.
Totally agree. And let's go with Russell's next. Russell's got a great question, and this was about an hour ago or so, but or half an hour ago. But he just arrived, and he jumps in and he says, "Just arrived. Wondering what you guys were think the likelihood of a third party winning a general election would be. Is Trump too tainted to pull enough from the left to win, or can he pull it off?" Here's the thing. I think that depends on how the Republican Party, what goes the Republican Party. I think the Republican Party, I could foresee events, Robert, where the Republican Party is gone pretty quickly. And
it's all going to be 2022. Whatever, yeah. If Trump candidates prevail in 2022 in the primaries and other places and in key general elections, then the Republican Party has a future as the Trump vehicle, or vehicle for Trumpism, even if not Trump personally. If it doesn't, the Republican Party will be dead by 2026.
They're done. That's it. I could actually even foresee, if everything was to go, for those who want to see a third party, and everything goes horribly wrong for Republicans, all the stars align for them, and for the third party people, and horribly wrong for the Republicans, and they're destroyed. And by 2022, it's obvious they're not a national force anymore. I could foresee a scenario where 2024 rolls around, there's a legitimate Green Party person who opposes a corporatist Democratic administration. There's a non-issue libertarian. It could happen. I mean, for the first time in our history, I do see a way for now that has to be a certain kind of candidate. Like Donald Trump could have made
if you think about it, I mean, really in the post-Cold War era, we had major third-party candidates in almost every election since then. I mean, at least if you compare it to the prior elections. So we had major third-party candidate in 92 and 96, 2000. 2004, they saw Nader as such a threat. They spent massive amounts of money keeping him off of ballots.
Yeah.
Then in 2016, multiple third-party challengers. So the third parties have been growing, and only but for Trump was, I think, it low in 2020. If there had been a return to a Bush-Clinton type race, there would have been massive third-party interest on both the left and the right.
I agree.
And I think that's only going to grow. And so unless the Republican Party allows it to be taken over by Trumpists. So that's the key. And so I think 2022 really will tell us that in a major way. And what happens if they take back the House, take back the Senate because of Trump voters? What they do with that between then and 2024 is going to make a big difference.
Big deal. Yeah, big deal. And I'll tell you, people should remember, Bill Clinton never won a majority. Ever.
Right, yeah.
Ever. The roles could be, you could see the roles reversed, where an independent candidate is the benefactor of that. Mm-hmm. People don't understand. We're focused so much on the Republicans. Look at the fighting already with Joe Biden saying he would not sign that student loan, right? And AOC went berserk. There is no way to hold together their coalition. It's not, they don't have enough in common. It's easy to be the opponent, guys. It's easy to be the minority, the out of power coalition that is voting against somebody, but it's much harder to govern and then make everybody sad. That's the Marxist internal contradictions, and you cannot hold them together. It was his greatest fear. That was his greatest fear, internal contradictions, and they're everywhere. Joe Biden cannot hold this thing together. I'm telling you, it's not possible.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's going to be a major problem. So I think some degree of third party politics will surface in the next presidential election or two, and it will heavily depend on which party embraces populism and which party rejects it.
Yeah, that's it. That was a good question, though. That was a really good question. And anybody who wants to get involved, I mean, they can contact us, and we'll talk more about that. I mean, I don't want to talk about something like that on air. One, I mean, there's going to be a lot of people who call us that just aren't viable. I'm just being honest. That's the reality of life. And then there are others who it's amazing how there are like diamonds in the rough out there, Robert. All over. And
I mean, no doubt about that. And I think there's utility often to running. If you're running for something that even when you can't win, there's other benefits to as a learning experience, if nothing else. Now, I think now to one of the earlier questions, it might not be maybe to crowdfund like a monthly poll.
There's a
honest
lot of
job
questions.
approval.
Yeah,
do some do ancestral testing, test certain groups that no one is. Maybe do the poll over the whole month.
Yeah.
Polling a certain number each day to get a decent subsample. So I think that might be worthwhile project to do.
The things are in
sort
there.
of the public polling project, especially given we're not going to get honest polls. I dug into the YouGov polls and the Monmouth polls and the internals. The internals are that Biden's job approval is the same as it was at election time. Basically, he's about half the country approves of him, and just slightly over. And there's a lot more people that disapprove that for some reason they're being put in the don't know category.
Yep.
But you dig into the data, he gets low single digits amongst Trump voters approve of him. Single digits of people who voted for him disapprove of him. So it's almost identical to the +4 margin he had nationally. Yeah. And but they're shifting to all adults. They're shifting to very flexible definitions of registered voters, not going off of voter file panels. So that they're doing every manipulative technique to create ridiculous numbers that everybody has to know are not true, and somehow don't know has surged. I mean, all of a sudden, 20% of the country doesn't know whether they approve or disapprove of Joe Biden.
Robert. Come on.
They're clearly hiding people who disapprove by structuring the questioning in a certain way.
You don't remember the poll that I told you about that I just read about Mike Pence being the next in line if there was...
Oh, yeah, and then omitting Ron DeSantis, Mike Pence being behind Trump a little bit. I mean, there's that's what you're saying, the Pence one. That's a freaking joke.
The way to do that with Trump is by putting multiple Trumps in the test ballots.
Yeah.
So they'll put Donald Trump and Donald Trump Jr. as if Trump Jr. is going to run against Trump.
His father.
They're solely doing that to split up the Trump vote and confuse the people answering the poll. And so there would be definite value to getting honest feedback on where Biden really stands, and honest feedback as to where Trump and Trumpism really stands, and honest feedback as to certain policies. Like we're not going to get any honest polling on the immigration bill. We're not going to get any honest polling on the election bill. We're not going to get any honest polling on the gun control bill. So the asking questions that highlight, do you think the government should require you to spend thousands of dollars on a federal license and go through a shrink test before you can assert your self-defense rights to own a gun? Right? I mean, phrasing it in ways they will never phrase it.
Do you think 11 million people should get amnesty when 10 million are out of work? That is the correct way.
Do you think we should let people into the country because they claim asylum, even if they haven't been cleared for a COVID test?
Yep.
Do you think that if anybody that's allowed in the country, do you think people who have already been deported for committing crimes should be allowed to be legal citizens in the United States? Because that's part of Biden's immigration proposal.
That's exactly what he's doing.
And the big one is the family loophole. The family loophole means he's not looking at 11 million, and at least closer to 17 million off the top. They're using a number that's 8 years old for how many illegals are here. But it's 17 million rule to allow all the family members to come in.
Yep.
It's closer to 30 or 40 million.
It really is closer to 30. It is. At this point, it is. 17 with that.
Including African-American voters, including Latino voters along the border. Do you want 30 to 40 million new people brought into the low-wage labor pool? And what he's talking about today, extending healthcare services to people that are here illegally. Free healthcare. Do you believe in free healthcare and free education for people who came here illegally? So, some of those which they're not going to ask. And they won't even use the word illegal anymore. So those questions and things like on HR 1, do you think the government should give candidates money to run for office?
Right.
Because that's a big part of the bill that they're going to try to bury.
We should put together, maybe that's what I'll do then. We should put together some rough questionnaire. The links are in the thing right now for people who are watching. If you're watching on YouTube or anywhere, right? They're in everything. I think it's all in the video description everywhere. The Venmo, the PayPal. I would do a GoFundMe, Robert. So it was like, we'll take the show to go over how much we raised. Like that's what we did in the past. I would do a GoFundMe, but they're going to shut you down. They're gonna, right? I mean, don't you foresee that? Plus, they take a lot. They take more than like Venmo, if I'm not mistaken. So, doing a monthly "What are the odds?" a poll would be great. It would be great. I would do it if you guys want to fund it. Of course, I'll do it. It's down in the screen now, and I'll do it today. I'll start working on a questionnaire today, just so to answer some of the questions. When we first did it, it was before he took office. Basically, and it was into the days of his inauguration, and it was 48%. And then he went up to 52 a little bit after it was about 7 days in his presidency when that was done. And he had a 52% approval rating. And then when he did Keystone was the last time we tested it. And that was like right after Keystone, which is what I shared with Bannon when Matt Gaetz was on and asked me about it. Because Keystone, it was pretty clear. Matt was no fool. He was like, this is Keystone, Rich, right? And I'm like, yeah, sure is. Because union households went from approval 52-45 or something approved to 51-41 disapprove. So it was clearly a union piss-off move. That's what it was. And that certainly hurt him with working men. And then Hispanics, by the way, too. Working Hispanics. That's where he dipped. That's what did it. That was entirely responsible.
It's Mexican-American Democrats along the border of Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico that are saying, don't do this, Biden, on immigration reform. Because they saw, through the great myth. I mean, this is why, how public opinion, public opinion polling matters. Good data analysis matters. Is that the fake autopsy after the 2012 presidential election said that they needed to have more liberal immigration policies in order to win over working-class Black and Latino voters. Trump proved it was exactly the opposite.
Totally
Limiting the scope of illegal immigration is what led to increased participation and support amongst working class Latinos. Biggest improvement any Republican candidate has made in presidential history amongst Latinos from one election to the next is what Trump did between 2016 and 2020. I mean, again, he won Zapata County. George W. Bush, even the ex-governor of Texas, who made massive efforts to appeal to Hispanic, didn't get close to winning Zapata County.
44%. Yeah, right.
I mean, it's named after the Mexican Revolutionary. Yeah. That's a reason why it's a 95% Mexican-American county. And what it was, they don't want a bunch of people flooding across their border. They don't want a bunch of competition for low-wage jobs. They're tired of being the economic brunt and economic burden so that the Frenches of the world can have cheap gardeners and low cost maids, and the construction industry can have low cost workers replace American workers, and a whole bunch of industries that do that. And not only in agriculture, but in construction and day labor, you name it. So that's who's going to lose out.
We'll do that. We'll do the
number one will be working class Mexican Americans and Black Americans.
Absolutely. They are the ones who take the brunt of this policy. That's the thing, is that like white liberals never have to live with the consequences of that. And they were totally bad. And that's why, they'll never tell you the truth. And we could do something that, obviously the approval thing is, there are others out there, but we could do things that test legislation the right way. We could talk about ancestry, because tell you what, Robert, doing what we did last time, was you can't wait for that stuff, but it tells you, hey, you severely underrepresented somebody over here. It gives you red flags that these other pollsters don't. They couldn't see if they wanted to.
Exactly. Red flag for Biden was Norwegian high-level support for Trump. Red flag for Trump, Swedes, Nordic, Yankees, what's called English, but trending against Trump. So, where those ancestral groups are responding is definitely key. And then where Cubans and Venezuelans are versus where Puerto Ricans and Mexican Americans are, new immigrants, the difference between private sector union people and public sector union people is going to be very big and likely growing during the Biden term.
Yeah, that's a great place to start. That's a great place to leave it off. We'll do it, guys. We'll do it. I'll start working on a rough questionnaire, and it would be able to change because this administration's not going to stop when it comes to policy. They're not going to get into.
They think they got 2 years to get everything through.
Yes,
because they don't think they're going to have the Senate 2022.
That's right. They're going to try to keep. There's not going to be the first 100-day kind of rundown. It's this not. They're going to keep. It'll be the first 2-year rundown. Yep. That's what they're going to do. So we'll have plenty of time to poll this stuff. So it's in there if you want to fund it. We'll, of course, go over the details of the funding, like we did last time, so you guys see it. But
and to help create talking points for candidates, talking points for the independent press,
make the right
talking
decisions.
points for the Trump world, so that they know what the real data is, the real information is, and where they can take advantage of Biden vulnerabilities.
And if they have anybody has an alternate suggestion for crowdfunding where it could be like publicly, because look what happened with Rasmussen. They ran into a problem. So they tried to do it where here's the U.S., pick the state you want, here's GoFundMe. But if you have an alternate to GoFundMe or crowdsource, whatever the other one is, I'm all ears, because these people
one
are militant.
possibility would be through your local board. I think you can separately raise money through. They're creating these tips and whatnot.
Let me look into that, Robert. I think that's what some people said that actually already. Like, can't you do it on locals? That would be great. We can probably
because also
campaigns.
You can use like cryptocurrency to buy some. They're creating mechanisms by which you can buy their chips.
Okay.
Which become their own payment processing to avoid any censorship issues.
Keep an eye out for a post on that, folks. I'm going to look into that, and we'll go, because I do like that idea, and we've had a lot of people saying, hey, are you going to continue to do what you did before the election? I just didn't think, people, their interest gets higher before the election, and it fizzles afterward. But the amount of propaganda polling we're seeing is outrageous. I'll also tweet the Newsbusters article I did about, the Biden's approval at 62%. I gave them thorough takedowns of these people, and they're not going to stop. So there has to be some place where polls and media outlets can get legitimate information to help them make the right decisions, because public polling does matter. And that's what's so scary about these people not caring that they are not accurately representing people's opinions. Well, with that in mind, my friend, good show as always. I told Robert it may be a little bit bumpy with the new thing. It wasn't bumpy at all. This went off without a hitch.
It was bumpy.
A little bumpy. Laura said, it was bumpy.
I don't like your color.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
I don't like the mics. I have to fix the audio.
All right, so she's got a little list of tweak stuff to do. But, hey, it was not bumpy for me. I didn't see a black screen anywhere. All right, so we'll see you guys next week. Don't miss Inside the Numbers on Wednesday. Robert, thank you, my friend, as always. We'll see you soon.
Absolutely.
Have a good one. So,
You know what, guys, real quick before we go, do not forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. All right, don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel, of course. Don't forget to like the page, People Spun It Daily, on Facebook, and hit the notification bell. That'll let you know when to go live. Also, you can, of course, follow us all on Locals. And with that, I'm going to end. See you guys on Wednesday morning, Inside the Numbers, 11 a.m.